what you like to do?
Oh, I don't know. Play chess. Screw.
Well, let's play chess.
Richardson gonna take off and run. He's in there! Touchdown! I-N-D-Y! Outside give to Taylor. Stretching it out. He's at the 5, and he walks in untouched. Jonathan Taylor. Turner wants to do more damage, and he does.
Here's Halliburton into the front court. Mishandled it, but gets a shot. Hits it! Hits it!
John, I have never been better to be on the air with you here in Indianapolis, a place where so many of my dreams have come true.
The Ride with JMV on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Let's see if I've got 3 hours of voice to be able to do this. Like a lot of you fighting some sort of late summer, early fall kind of crud. And while that's like 7 or 8 days removed, normally, I guess I do have a cough button here, but normally I've got a partner that I can play off of, or these days I'm on video or TV or stream or something where you can kind of lay out, let the picture tell the story. No, this is 3 hours and about 3 conversations, and the rest would be you and me. The telephone lines are certainly open to you throughout the course of the show. My name is Greg Rakestraw, and John today has a date with the Odin Meat Locker. And of all of the reasons that you could take a day off from a radio show, John may be unique in that his favorite thing to do on a day off is go to the Odin Meat Locker. Nothing against the good folks in Odin. I love northern Davies County, and I'm a fan of meat. There's no doubt about that. But I'm not sure I'm taking myself off a 3-hour radio show to go to the Meat Locker. But that's what makes John, and that's what gives me the opportunity to talk to you, whether you're watching on the social media streams of 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan, whether you are listening, and I am much better looking if you don't look at me on the video camera right now. If you're listening at, say, 1075thefan.com, on the HD2 and HD3 signals, or the traditional method of 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Whatever the way in which you're going to interact with us, thank you for doing so. And those of you that are still here, thank you for not turning the channel the moment you hear somebody else's voice other than John, even if it's the guy whose voice probably most closely resembles John in the market. As I always do, the substitute teacher tries to take liberty in terms of having plenty of guests to make the show a bit easier for me, since I don't do this on a daily basis anymore. I've got 3 of them. I think they're all going to be of quality. 2 of them are in the first half of the show. So if you've got something you want to say, well, you don't have to wait. You can, hit the chat room on the YouTube page. You can always interact with me on Twitter at Greg Rakestraw. You can go old school and dial the show and actually hear your own voice on the radio if you want to at 317-239-1070. When we're not doing that, here's what I've got in store for you. 1 solid guest, I think, if not better, each hour of the show. While it is early October, and when you're in an NFL market, that is going to be your dominant topic. I was in this chair 47 to 44 hours ago, and not much has changed for the Indianapolis Colts since Bill Brooks and I broke down a 37-34 loss at Jacksonville again. The only thing that seemingly has changed is the Colts waived one of their starters from the game on Sunday, that being Dallas Flowers. That news, of course, coming down yesterday. But if you still got something you want to get off your chest in talking about the Colts, feel free. All those ways in which I gave you are certainly available to you if you want to have that conversation. I'm a trained professional, been doing this for a long time and doing the post-game show for the Colts for the last 13 years. I'm good at letting you vent. So if you want to dial us up and talk about that, feel free. As of now, no specific Colts-related guest. That is always subject to change. But the other topic that we will get to, and let's face it, we probably spend more time, and maybe it's because I'm a big fan of preseason games, especially doing television broadcasts of them. We don't talk as much about NBA preseason games, but given the season and the playoff run the Indiana Pacers just had, given the fact that we are your home for Indiana Pacers basketball on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan, we can rejoice in the fact there is at least preseason basketball tonight. Any excuse to get Mark Boyle and Pat Boylan on these airwaves is a good thing for everybody involved. And Pat will be joining us coming up, in fact, in the next segment of the show. Obviously, Pat stayed busy over the course of the last 3 months by doing all things Indiana Fever and being named as one of the top broadcasters in the WNBA. In fact, the top broadcast crew of the WNBA was the Indiana Fever, and frankly, it's deserved because he and Debbie and Kelsey were really, really good. So I'm sure we'll talk some Fever with Pat, but yes, Pacers preseason starts tonight. And if you haven't checked your Pacers preseason schedule, here is the rundown. 4 games over the next 9 nights, 2 on the road, 2 at home. Then they tip it off for real against the Pistons 2 weeks from tomorrow night. So it's at the Hawks tonight. It's at the Cavaliers on Thursday night. It's home for the Grizz on Monday night. It's home for the Hornets on Thursday night. Whom they're playing in the preseason does not matter. How much the veterans play in the preseason, time will tell. And obviously, it is a long season. But it's one that has high expectations. As well they should, given what that team accomplished last year, given the rapid progress. And again, once you make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, you hit fast forward on things. Once you bring back the pieces in which they did, that means that you don't think you're that far away. And so we enter a preseason, I would say without much in the way of question for the Indiana Pacers. Maybe in terms of rotation, but I think I got a pretty good handle on that as well. So we'll talk about that. And again, 317-239-1070. Greg at 1070thefan.com. That's like an old school email reference I can give you if you actually ever want to do that. Hit me up on Twitter at Greg Rakestraw. We'll talk about this in the chat room too. But you got some Pacers questions, Pacers thoughts. We're not going to do season predictions on the first night of the preseason. We'll save that for a couple of weeks from now. But if you want to talk about all things blue and gold, my goodness, we can do that as well. Now, something that here, unfortunately, because October is such a busy month, like, for example, every Sunday night on the Fan from April through September, you're pretty much going to hear a Major League Baseball game. You know what you don't hear much of in October? There's like multiple games every night. A lot of baseball here on the Fan. There's just not enough room between Pacers broadcasts, between Colts conversation, between being the home of Indiana football. Now that's a much bigger deal now than it has been. I'll get to more about that in a second. We can't fit in many playoff baseball games in the Fan. Just at some point in time, you are officially out of real estate. And I will admit to you that I have largely checked out on Major League Baseball, except maybe this is why I don't do this full time. I don't have the ego to sit here and say, well, there must be something wrong with Major League Baseball because I'm not watching it. No, I point to myself and say it's me. I'm not sure if it's a problem, but it's just me. And kind of the same way that I say, hey, there's just not enough room on the Fan to carry that many postseason games. Buddy, my plate is full, as you can tell from my waistline. I clear it pretty well, at least 2 or 3 times a day. But with all the different teams that I am calling and things that I am doing, whether it's here, ISC, et cetera, I don't have that much casual time. And, if the Reds were better, I'm probably more locked in. But I have been trying to make an effort to watch more of these baseball playoffs. And I started thinking, who of my friends that have played the sport, have covered the sport, could I have on and talk intelligently about the sport? So I decided to go to a guy that's been a closer in a playoff scenario and has a Stanford education, and I have known him since he was like 11 or 12 years old. It's hard to make that segue from 11 or 12 years old talking about, being in the bourbon business, but he is, at least in the whiskey business. That would be Field of Dreams, and that would be Drew Storen, who will join us during the 4 o'clock hour of the program. There's other things that we'll get to as well, but talking some playoff baseball with Drew, I'm looking forward to that conversation. And I'm not going to lie. I want to see the little guys do well. I want to see the long-suffering franchises do well. I know it's been like 15 years since the Yankees won a World Series. That doesn't engender any sympathy from me because it's been 40 years since the Tigers won one. It's been, if I can do the math, I ran on of fingers and toes a while on this, 76 years since the Indians won one. The Padres, it's never happened for them. The Royals actually won one 9 years ago and have not been to the playoffs since. And maybe I don't feel so bad about the Royals right now because they keep winning Super Bowls. So the folks in Kansas City aren't exactly starving for a winner. But you get my point. And actually, and I forget where I brought – there's so many random things that just pop on your Facebook feed at this point in time. There are things that you read that you don't have to cite the source just because they just randomly appear in front of you. But if you go back and look at the last 25 or 30 years in terms of baseball, there's not exactly a lot of dynasties. Yeah, there are certain teams that will get to the playoffs more than others. Yankees, Red Sox, well, not as much lately. Braves, even the Mets to a lesser degree. But seemingly everybody has had a run of success, unless you're a Reds fan and your team hasn't won a playoff series since 1995 or when I was a sophomore in college. And I celebrated my 30th high school reunion earlier this summer. So it's been a while. Maybe that's why I'm soured on baseball. Although Terry Francona being the new manager of the Reds tends to have me a bit more fired up. Other guests that will join us, and normally at this time of the year, we are already starting to shift our attention away from college football locally to college basketball, especially if you're an Indiana Hoosier fan. By this point in time in the season, in each of the last 3 years, you're like, hey, when's basketball season start? Now, this week, you're pissed because the Hoosiers are on a bye because you want to see them win again. Now, Jake and Eddie and Jimmy were just in here. I see Jake every Tuesday when he and Derek Schultz produce Query and Schultz on the ISC Sports Network. Shameless self-promotion. Their weekly show debuts at 7:30 this evening. And also, in the interest of transparency, that show is produced every Tuesday morning in the ISC studios, and then Jake immediately heads here to do the show. So I get to see Jake every Tuesday morning. You may or may not know this. I'm the graphics guy for that show. I do not have an on-air appearance, and that's fine. Lord knows I'm on the air all the friggin' time as it is. Being behind the scenes on something, I'm kind of cool with that. I get to make my snarky comments at times in terms of the graphics machine. And I felt compelled, as they were talking about IU football earlier, to put seriously after every statement. As in, the Indiana Hoosiers were the first team in FBS football to be bowl eligible in 2024. Seriously, that actually happened. And the Indiana Hoosiers are legitimately in the college football playoff conversation. Seriously, that is a real thing that is happening in 2024. Or that Kurt Cignetti has been so good as a head coach. I hate to say this. You might be one and done in Bloomington. I hope not. I hope not. I hope this is the start of a beautiful friendship. I hope this is a start of a long-term relationship. I hope this is once again planting the flag in the ground for that college football Saturdays are important at the FBS level here. Now, Purdue fans, obviously you're not part of that conversation this year. You have been more of a part of this conversation, say, in this current generation. From 1997 on, you've had more good years than bad, and obviously have had some years where you've been competing for Big Ten championships, New Year's Day bowl games, etc. But the run that Indiana is on, I wouldn't say is so unexpected, but is so different than the norm. Oh, and by the way, I want to make sure one of my Facebook buddies and Matt put this on Facebook, and I wanted to, he's actually a friend in real life, but got this from his Facebook page. And he goes, by the way, be careful what you wish for. The last 4 really good years in the history of Indiana University football, one was at the end of World War II, one was the height of the Vietnam War, and one was during the pandemic. So Lord knows what might happen in 2024. Duly noted. And I know we're skipping over some of the Bill Mallory teams that were pretty damn good in the late 80s, but you get my point. There seems to be sort of cosmic interference that happens when Indiana is actually good in football. Well, Zach Osterman of the Indianapolis Star will be joining us. His conversation will be the last one that we play today. We will finish the show talking with Zach at about 5:35 or 5:40, and he and I can both be a little long-winded, so that conversation may go for a while, so the 5 o'clock hour clock will sound a little bit different. Like James won't have to be like pulling that man bun of his out, trying to get John to go to break. He knows I'll actually hit the posts. As we would say, you're welcome. There's not a camera on him, but I can see him. He does the hands to God. Thank you. You're welcome. We'll hit it this one time, and it'll never happen again in the history of this show. But Zach and I will talk Indiana football. And again, I want them to be relevant. I frankly want Purdue to be relevant. They're not this year. And obviously at Purdue, they're having a conversation about a coaching change as well from the exact opposite end of the spectrum. And that being after a year and a half, going on year number 2, do you have to hit the eject button already? And I cringe at saying it, but man, when you are clearly 18th in the Big Ten, when you have been getting your rear end handed to you and the meat of your schedule hasn't even hit yet. I mean, Notre Dame's pretty good, all right? Oregon State, well, they're one of the 2 best teams in their league this year. I get that. Wisconsin is thought to be bad for them, very much a mid-table sort of team. I saw this, I think 5 of the ranked teams in the Big Ten are yet to appear on Purdue's schedule, and they're going to. In other words, there's not exactly a lot of room for optimism. Even Illinois, who normally go, hey, we can beat those guys. Well, they're 23rd in the country this week. And Purdue has looked a lot closer to 123rd. By the way, there's 134 teams that are playing FBS football this year. So if any of those topics, the Colts, it's October in Indianapolis. Pacers, preseason opener night against the Atlanta Hawks. Radio coverage begins at 7 o'clock on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Playoff baseball, or, yes, we're still talking Indiana football. All of those things are up for grabs right now. 317-239-1070 is the telephone number. At Greg Rakestraw on Twitter. Greg at 1070thefan.com. And I promise I'll check the YouTube chat room during the breaks, because I'm not John can do this because he does this every day. I can't be scrolling over here and then try to make a cogent thought on the air. He can do that. I can't compartmentalize like that. Now, because I'm used to doing this from a television standpoint, I could do full play-by-play with somebody in my ear saying, this is the shot we're going to, this is the next sponsor you're going to read. That I can do, because I do it all the time. But that, no. So those of you that leave a comment in the YouTube chat room, I'll check it during the breaks. And so this is your chance. If you said something mean about me and don't want me to read it, delete it now. You got about 5 minutes before I go to the next commercial break, and that will get James a little bit of a warning shot, too. Other things we could talk about, too. Monday Night Football, the Chiefs winning last night, 26-13 over the Saints. They are one of 2 unbeaten teams at 5-0. Always can do a bit of a recap in terms of Monday Night Football. And the other thing that I want to say is this, and obviously, I want to keep the show light. It's sports. There's other more serious topics that you could be listening and talking about right now. There's other stations in the market for that. I had that point drilled into me as a young broadcaster when 9/11 happened. And I realized at a very early stage in my life that I can take what I do seriously, but don't take myself too seriously, and know that when you're talking about sports, you are truly talking about the toy box of life. But my thoughts, my concerns, my prayers, my best wishes are for all of those in the path of Hurricane Milton. And while I briefly lived as a young child down in the Bonita Springs area, which seemingly is going to be a little further south from the most difficult path and the path of devastation that this storm seems to be on. My family and I very much have a soft spot in our heart for Clearwater Beach. That is one of our favorite family destinations. You ever spent time along Clearwater Beach? The Pink Hotel next to Pier 60, the Hyatt, that is the unofficial getaway of the Rakestraw family from time to time. And that and everything in that vicinity is going to bear the brunt of an historically terrible storm. Frankly, a hotel is the least of concerns because that's a nice place to get away. That's not where people live. Further up and down the coast, that's not the case. Further inland in the bay, that's not the case. And again, if you're active on social media, we've all seen it. We've all seen that friend, that relative that lives down there, that knows somebody that lives down there. And in my case, it is my niece. You may not know that I have a sister, and I have a niece and a nephew, and my niece lives in Ruskin, Florida, which is on the bay side, kind of directly across from St. Pete and due south from Tampa. And for whatever reason, I know the reasons, and I won't share them here, but she's decided they're going to ride it out. And I want to hug her and slap her at the exact same time because I've seen her post that on Facebook, and I've seen my sister comment on it and her friends comment on it, and we just want to say, and I promise you don't have to scurry for the dump button here, James. I'll self-edit here. Get the out and go home. Go north. Go back to Kentucky. Go back to the Louisville area where you are from. You've got a place to stay. Nobody's going to charge you. But she's stubborn, and that gene runs in the Rakestraw family. And my guess is the story that I just told is going to be repeated like tens of thousands of times over the course of the next couple of days. So I've saw that the hurricane path has taken a bit of a turn south, which can certainly help the Tampa area. Not so much for St. Pete. I'm not sure what it means for Clearwater. But frankly, wherever it's going to go from here, it's going to devastate some places. And there's potentially the loss of life. And so I've already sent a couple of different text messages to friends of mine that are connected to folks down there, live in that area, etc. And so, well, we're going to have a good time on the show today, talking about all things sports. I at least wanted to address it early in the program. If you've got friends and family that are in that area, and for some reason they're wanting to stay, I hope for the love of God you can talk some sense into them over the course of the next 36 hours, because there's going to be a certain point when there's nowhere that you're going to go. James is going to love the show today. He said break, and that's what I'm going to do. Pat Boylan is coming up next. Your phone calls, your tweets, you in the chat room whenever you would like. My name is Greg Rakestraw, filling in for JMV. He's at the Meat Locker. Seriously. You're listening to 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
You got a joint?
No, not on me, man.
It'd be a lot cooler if you did.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
The earth is about to start spinning for the NBA and for the Indiana Pacers. 4 preseason games, 82 regular season games, and hopefully a playoff run equal or better than the one they had a season ago. And if it's better, well, it would be something we haven't experienced in 25 years in these parts. Pat Boylan, who, of course, there is no offseason for him. It's 40 Fever games. It's 90 or more Pacers games. I'm sure he wouldn't have it any other way. He joins us on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Happy preseason opener to you, my friend. How you doing?
Thank you very much. Doing well. Appreciate you having me on. And you said it, whenever one season goes into the next around here, it's a good thing. And the Pacers had that Eastern Conference Finals run, which ran into the Fever season. And there was, about a week between Fever and Pacers because the Fever went into the playoffs. So when the two seasons are running into each other, it means good times. So I'll take it 10 out of 10.
And by the way, Pat was very wise. He knew that once the playoffs started, that his broadcast responsibilities were over. So he did sneak in a vacation, in case you're wondering about Pat's well-being, going in now to the upcoming Pacers season. So let's talk Fever now that is in the past tense. Obviously, Kelly Kroskoff had her press conference today. I realize this answer could take 5 minutes or longer, but when you look back at what unfolded for the team that you have covered for the last several years in the summer, where to begin to start to describe what 2024 was like for you and for the franchise?
Well, it's really hard to even know where to begin. You know, I have found myself just kind of scraping my jaw up off the floor for months now. And at some point, I think it's all going to set in. But to be honest, it really hasn't. When I think about the season in general, you know, the first things that just keep coming back to me are every single night, a few moments before opening tip when they're doing the opening lineups and the lights are out in the building and they're announcing the starting five, and you're looking up into the upper corners of the balcony and you can't find any open seats. And that's not a one-off game. That's every single night, every single day for 20 home games. And to just constantly have that for the Indiana Fever was a spectacle to behold. And to be able to have one of the biggest stars in all of sports, regardless of sport, here in this city, and in so many ways, you know, there are many big stars around the sports landscape, but this is a completely new venture in a lot of ways for women's basketball and for the WNBA. And to be able to tell that story right here locally in Indianapolis, to have Caitlin Clark's historic rookie year happen right here. I mean, I'm still pinching myself for my own reasons, for, you know, the city, for the franchise, for Pacers Sports and Entertainment, for all of it. And then obviously just getting to look forward and knowing that this story is just very, very young, very, very new, that it's going to have a lot of chapters to it, and hopefully ones where we're talking about playoff series wins and championships and all of that. And you mentioned Kelly Kroskoff, who helped bring a championship to the Fever, announced today officially, at least her introductory press conference was today, that she'll be taking back over for president of basketball operations. And anybody that has followed the Fever for any amount of time knows the impact that she's had on the Fever. And then she moved over and the impact she had on the Pacers as well. So I'm not sure I've been, you know, fully able to just allow the season to sink in. But it was one that I know I'll never forget, and I'm very grateful to have a small seat on the ride for. By the way,
Pat Small's seat was named to be as part of the best broadcast crew in the WNBA from a local standpoint. And, buddy, you and the crew earned it, so job well done on that front. And I ask this from a position of ignorance because I simply have never really had to track it before. I kind of know when the WNBA draft is. I know when the next season starts. But now that we're all invested in this, there's this thing called free agency. When does that period kind of kick in for the WNBA? And I know there's going to be an expansion draft for the first time in some time as well. What are those dates in terms of kind of the next bit of business, for lack of a better term, for Fever fans?
Yeah, well, I appreciate those comments, and we were able to bring Debbie Antonelli back, who's one of the very best color analysts in the entire world, and Kelsey Casper came on board. And look, we've got a great crew, top to bottom, that helps make all of that happen. And I'm so grateful to have a role in all of that. And when you start to look forward here, it's an interesting offseason because for the first time in a long time, there's going to be an expansion draft. And that's going to be the case for the next couple of years because the WNBA growing popularity, both before Caitlin Clark got here, but it certainly has been turbocharged since her arrival. You're seeing more teams added to the league. You're going to add one in the Bay Area this year coming up for next season. And so similar to what other leagues have done, although in major professional sports I can't think of too many recent examples of this, you're going to have an expansion draft. So the WNBA announced some of its rules for that, which is you can protect 6 of your own players, and then the new Bay Area franchise, the Valkyries, will have the opportunity to pluck players from existing rosters and start to create their own team. So the first kind of thing you're going to have to watch for as a Fever fan will be who do the Fever decide to protect, and then will the Valkyries select any of those unprotected players? And then you kind of go from there. And in a lot of ways, while the calendar is very different, of course, the WNBA plays in the summer, and unlike the NBA, the WNBA draft is right before the season starts. So it's not exactly an exact parallel, but a lot of what you're used to in the NBA happens in the WNBA too. There's a free agency period where you'll see potential player movement. That'll happen. It's typically early in the new calendar year. So you're talking early in 2025. That'll be a possibility. Players can sign extensions before that. And then there's a trade period that exists as well before the draft where you'll see a lot of trading going on. And what you've seen over the last few years in the WNBA has been a trend in the direction of what happens in the NBA, which is you're seeing a whole lot more player movement. You're seeing those periods of time be a lot more active. So from the Fever perspective, the good news is you've got Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston locked down for the long term. Kelsey Mitchell will be a big one to watch. She's extension eligible, and how she decides to maneuver through everything and how the Fever want to handle that. It was something that Kelly Krauskopf spoke to this morning, and just how important it is for her in this franchise to hopefully get something locked down with their 2-time All-Star Kelsey Mitchell. But, you know, as we're talking about just the rising tides of this league, I love the fact that I'm sitting here with you, Greg, on October 8th, and we're talking about Indiana Fever basketball in the WNBA. And it's a great sign of progress that we are doing just that.
All right, final thing on the Fever, and then I promise you'll get to the Pacers since the preseason starts tonight. Favorite Caitlin Clark moment of the year, whether that is a play, whether that is an interaction with a fan, whether it's a fan base here or on the road. If I said, point to me a quintessential Caitlin Clark moment from her first year, what would it be?
You know, the moment that probably jumps out, unfortunately, it wasn't one that we were on the call for because it was an ESPN telecast, but I was in the building, and her first quote-unquote logo 3 is probably one that I won't forget, and it was against Connecticut, and it wasn't just a logo 3. I mean, it might have ended up being the deepest 3 that she hit all year, and when she hit it, just the excitement that came out of that building, it felt on par with like the game-winning shot in a playoff game. It was kind of a magical moment, and she had plenty of them throughout the year, but kind of experiencing that first one, it was a few games because the Fever struggled early on, and she hadn't had, I guess, a signature moment yet, and it was just kind of all this pent-up energy waiting for that singular, long, deep, signature Caitlin Clark 3 to fall. That one certainly jumps out. And then, I think just in general, the way that she handled everything in her rookie year and continues to handle, and I've said this more than 100 times probably now, but she never made a verbal misstep at any point.
Not one. No. Yeah.
And I think that is what impressed me most about the Caitlin Clark season. Multiple triple-doubles and one of the best rookie seasons we've ever seen and all of that. But her ability as a 22-year-old, her intelligence and her ability to navigate at times treacherous waters as gracefully and as eloquently as she did, if there's one moment, for me at least, in my position that stands out about her rookie year, to be honest, it's how she handled everything off the floor which would be impressive for somebody in their 30s or 40s or 50s to do. But for a 22-year-old was just simply remarkable to me.
Again, Pat Boylan, the voice of the Fever, obviously a big part of Pacers radio and television, joins us now. So now we turn the page to the Pacers, and an Eastern Conference finalist for the first time in 10 years. And as you should do in that scenario, they bring that team largely back together as a whole. This is a good problem to have. What questions do we kind of have about this group going into the season, Pat?
Well, it's a fascinating year to me from this perspective, and this seems to be kind of the dichotomy to me of the 2024-25 Indiana Pacers going into it, which is on one hand, you've got a Pacers team perhaps with their highest expectations since 2013, 2014 maybe. That would be kind of the tail end before Paul George had the leg break, and the tail end on that era of Pacers teams based on success from a previous year. I think you could certainly make that case. You've got the stars in place and the young talent in place. On the other hand, I think nationally, a lot of people look at that run and they say, yeah, well, Giannis was hurt and the Knicks dealt with some injuries and the Pacers had a favorable bounce perhaps here or there, and that it was a blip on the radar. Now, there's nobody in the building, of course, that believes that. But in terms of the national perspective, I think some of that exists too, that last year was maybe a little bit of a fluke. So to me, they're kind of in this weird middle ground of expectations are high, and they should be high because of everything they've accomplished, the coach they have running it, the experience and the talent they have on the roster. But I think there still is very much we've still got a whole lot to prove narrative because of the way that their run was handled in a lot of ways nationally by the media. So I think the one thing you go into this year and you just hope is true is that they enter the year with a higher base than they did last year, that they enter the season in a better spot because of all that continuity. And it's something Rick Carlisle talked about. We're not doing a lot of standing around in training camp and in practices teaching because we don't have to do that,
right,
because we have the continuity, because almost everybody from last year's team who played a significant role is back. So there's still, I think will be questions about how this team can play defensively and if they can get to the level they need to defensively. That's probably the biggest one. But going into the year, I think the realistic hope would be that this team is ready right out of the gates. Now they've got a really tough schedule. So it's possible, a little bit like the Fever, that you don't see that show out necessarily in record by game 15. Hopefully it will, but that might be the case when you play a tougher schedule right out of the gate. But that this team's in a better spot foundationally here to enter 2024-25.
Pat Boylan, again, from Pacers Radio TV, Fever voice as well, joining us here. Greg Rakestraw in for JMV. He's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. You're listening to 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. To me, there are two players that are kind of question marks, not in terms of what they can, maybe one to a lesser degree, but just in terms of how they're going to be used. So let's start with Benedict Mathurin. Personally, I think he'd be phenomenal at a sixth-man role. How big of a question is it in terms of what his role is going to be at the start of the year?
Yeah, I think he would be phenomenal at it too. And I think what the coaching staff wants to see from him is just continued growth defensively, certainly. But the Pacers had a great run after he got injured. And so, and I'm not using any cause and effect there, but what I am saying is, can he find a way to play within the style that worked so well for the Pacers down the stretch, which was they didn't play quite as much of a breakneck speed. They focused more defensively. They were better defensively. Their offense was still very, very good. And all of that kind of meshed together in a strong close to the season. They were 16-10 over their final 26. And then the Eastern Conference playoff, the Eastern Conference run that we were talking about. So I think they want to see him kind of meld into everything that they have built upon, especially in the back half of the year, and that his skill set can fit into all of that. But I certainly think it can, and he becomes kind of that potential swing player where if all of a sudden you get a high-level scorer who's improving defensively and you add it to that mix, well, you start to talk about the upper end of possibilities of what this team could accomplish. they probably all include Benedict Mathurin playing in a really, really big role. And I think just in general, this isn't just true of Benedict, but probably numerous players on this roster. There's going to have to be, to a degree, an understanding that you might be capable of a certain role, but this is a team with a lot of depth. I mean, Carlisle said himself there's probably 11 guys who can make a really good case that they should be playing, and that's pretty unlikely that we're going to play 11 guys. And along those lines, Benedict Mathurin certainly, I think, has starting caliber talent and potential, but this team has a starting five. At least last year closed with one that worked really, really well. And so how does he handle all of that mentally and physically too? And he's coming off an injury. So I think he's the kind of guy that could really swing things in the right direction if it all fits together. And, you know, tonight's really potentially the start of all of that as he comes back from injury and works his way back in with this group.
All right, so the other guy, and finally before we let you go, bud, here's what I think Matherin's role is, sixth man. I love Toppin off the bench. Love McConnell off the bench. Obviously, you need to have a backup big. That's up for grabs, I think, between Jackson and Wiseman, say behind Miles Turner. Where exactly does Jarris Walker fit into the mix?
And that is right along the lines of you've got probably 11 guys,
right,
and maybe not 11 spots. And so I think that might individually be the most intriguing player to watch in terms of what is his role at the beginning of the season, where does he fit into things. And as you know very well, and as any fan of an NBA team knows, over the course of the year, injuries happen, players find themselves in different positions. I just think back to the beginning of last year when Rick Carlisle was pretty distraught, headed up to the podium after the first game of the year, even though the Pacers won, discussing a conversation that he had to have with TJ McConnell about how he might not see a ton of playing time this year. And we all know what happened there. I don't know if that's how the season is going to start for Jarris Walker. I do know that he's probably within this team has moved more into the 3 role than a 4, more of the small forward than a power forward. And I think that's a transition they've been working on with him, both with his skill set, but also just the depth on this team and what fits the best for this group. So he's somebody that's probably teetering on the edge of playing time as you start the season here, and maybe has a lot to gain throughout the preseason. But if he is somebody that starts the year maybe without significant playing time, I think the staff will find a way for him. There tends to be, situations throughout the course of a year where that stuff just kind of figures itself out. But Walker's second season here could be one worth watching just from the perspective of where does he go from here? He's a player that's been really intriguing and enticing to watch, but what does that look like with potentially regular minutes on an NBA floor? He's going to have to fight for them with how deep this group is, but I also think if you're a team that's going to play fast and potentially pick up full court a lot like they did in the playoffs, you're going to need to probably play more bodies, and that's probably where he benefits if that's the case.
Again, Pat Boylan, what year does this begin for you with the Indiana Pacers tonight?
This is 11.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's hard to believe that it's 11, but yeah, we are officially past double digits.
You look the same as you did 11 years ago. I didn't, but that's a conversation for a different day. Congratulations, my friend, and thanks for the time and the insight. I appreciate you.
Appreciate it, Greg. Thanks for having me on.
Pat Boylan, again, on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. We owe you a break. Come back, quick segment. Drew Storen, top of the hour. Greg Rakestraw in for JMV on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Ride with JMV.
This is your brain on drugs. Any questions?
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
All right, bit of a short segment here to make sure we get to our next fantastic guest on time. That's available on the podcast page. If not now, then soon. Pat Boylan, who joined us. Zach Osterman will join us at approximately 5:35 or so. We will finish the show today by talking about Indiana University football and the fact that we feel the need to have a 15 to 20-minute conversation about Indiana football is such a dramatic departure from, any other time that I've been doing this, and I've been doing this now for the better part of 30 years from a sports talk conversation, sports broadcasting situation here in central Indiana. Three quick hitters before we get you back to our next timeout. First of all, New England Patriots are officially making the move. Drake May is on the starting quarterback. Jacoby Brissett will go back to the bench. Patriots won their opener, have not won since. If you have not heard earlier today, the New York Jets made a move. They have fired their head coach in Robert Saleh. They are 2-3. This is on the heels after coming back from playing in London. Next up for them will be the Buffalo Bills. And the other thing that I was just kind of checking out during the break, and we'll talk more about this later on in the show, the track layout for the 2026 IndyCar event down in Arlington that runs around both the Rangers and Cowboys stadiums looks tremendous. And as someone that is a fanboy for IndyCar and Formula One too, a lot of things you draw from the Miami F1 race that I think this is an absolute home run for the IndyCar series. But we'll talk more about that later in the program. Some playoff baseball and other things. Drew Storen joins us at the top of the hour here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
The Ride with JMV.
The sportos, the motorheads, geeks, sluts, bloods, wastoids, dweebies, they all adore him. They think he's a righteous dude.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
I think our next guest is absolutely a righteous dude. We're going to talk baseball with him, but just some parts of life as well. It is Drew Storen that joins us. Greg Rakestraw in for JMV, and Drew joins us on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. How you doing, my friend?
Rake, I am great. Thank you so much for having me on. How you been?
I'm good. All right, let's talk about what's most important. Clearly, I've known your mom and dad for like longer than you've been around. Where they live got hit very hard from the remnants of Helene over the last 10 days. How are they doing?
They're doing all right. It's been obviously an eye-opening experience for them, and they're lucky being higher up in the mountains. Just had, one of the roads washed away. I guess when you say a road only washed away, but they've been, as Dad has said, slightly inconvenienced versus what the total catastrophe, I guess, around the whole area, which and talking to him, it just sounds out of this world. So, obviously, hopefully they get to piece it all together because Asheville is a beautiful place.
Yeah, and your dad is rarely at a loss for words. And this has kind of put him at that for a while. So that speaks volumes to me. Well, I'm glad to hear that they are doing okay. That is wonderful to hear. Now let's talk a little business. How's all in the bourbon and whiskey business going for you these days?
Oh, it's been great. I was actually just in D.C. A couple days ago launching our new SKU. We have a small batch that's actually going to be a year-round offering where we've licensed 20-plus and counting retired players, so either Hall of Famers or Hall of Fame stories, and we're hiding it under a opaque blue cap, so you got to open your bottle to see who you get. So it's like a pack of tops that'll get you drunk.
I was going to say, it's like a baseball card for middle-aged dudes. It's right up my alley.
Yeah.
I like this. Who are some of the players that you're working with, if you've announced that already?
Yeah, so we got Johnny Bench. We got, just to hit some of the Reds, and Bronson Arroyo, of course. We got Jim Tomei. Personal favorite of mine, Jay Buhner. Of course, we put the M frames on him. And then, let's see, who else we got? Shoeless Joe's in there. Tommy John, and we got a lot. So there's they'll all be on the website, but hopefully be on the shelves early next week here in Indy.
This may sound like a dumb question, but in terms of the original product, in terms of the corn from Field of Dreams, is this like a limited supply, or just you're going to keep planting corn and keep having bourbon from that every year?
Yeah, luckily there's plenty of corn, and it really doesn't take as much corn as you think to make bourbon, so we can get thousands of barrels out of that field every year, which, extrapolate that out, that's a ton of bottles. So we'll have 4,500 barrels down by the end of this year. So we've got a lot of juice.
You're in good shape then. All right. You've got a sound financial investment then. All right. Before we actually get to the playoff baseball, the other box I wanted to check, just because I was seeing, College Game Day at Cal. I know your bitter rival. Have you gotten adjusted to the fact that you now went to an ACC school?
Yeah, I don't even keep track anymore. I assume I don't know what month it is and what conference everybody's in anymore. It's just wild to think about. And I feel like I'm 100 years old when you're talking about the Pac-12, Pac-10, whatever. It's like it's wild, man. It's a completely different universe.
All right, so how much playoff baseball are you checking out these days?
Quite a bit. I didn't watch a ton during the season, but just seeing how these are just geographically locked rivals in division, like you want to talk about the ultimate chess match between teams, and it certainly lived up to it. There's tensions are high. You got guys talking junk on both sides. Like, this is electric baseball, man. It's must see for me.
First of all, I can't believe it's been 7 years since you last played in Major League Baseball. That kind of ages both of us, frankly, in the conversation. But of the guys that you were teammates, friends with, et cetera, who are the guys that are still involved of the 8 teams left playing in the playoffs?
Yeah, I got some guys on the Phillies. I'm kind of rooting for the Padres because one of my bullpen mates is a front office guy. So if that ages me at all, but so I'm hoping for him to get a ring. But yeah, there's a couple guys here and there, but nobody that was in the bullpen crew. My other bullpen teammate who's involved in the whiskey with me, Jerry Blevins, does the post game for S&Y. So, again, that's kind of where my friends are hanging out.
Understood. All right. You have lived this. How do you begin to describe? I can understand what's at stake. I get the fact it's win or go home. I get the marketing ploy there, but you've lived it. Just how different is a postseason game compared to what you do 162 times during the course of a year?
Oh yeah, it's a whole nother level. When you pitch in the big leagues, I always say you get to an extra gear that body, isn't used to, and that's why you see guys get hurt so often early in the season. But when you get to the playoffs, you're kind of dealing with a broken down race car, and you're having to redline that baby every night. So it's a lot different. I mean, you are going to have a little more rest baked into it, and you also have some teams that had days off, have teams that have a lot of momentum. There's just so many different factors, and then you add in again, these guys have seen each other all year, so there's going to be no surprises coming out of the bullpen, in that lineup whatsoever. So it's going to be pretty grindy baseball.
And maybe it's some of the things you talked about in terms of the broken down race car, but we have got to the point where seemingly of the major professional sports that the Major League Baseball playoffs have become the most random. That what you do, and again, this was not a year that had a dominant team, frankly, in it, so maybe this is more even random than most. But why do you think that is the case, that baseball has become where seemingly some of the biggest upsets happen, even though a 5 or 7 game format is kind of designed for that not to be the case?
Yeah, I think you look at the wild card and you see the momentum those teams have taken into the DS and all that. The thing is, if they made the DS 7 games, I think you would see less upsets. Water does tend to find its level, but that's the beauty of baseball in general, right? Like, we're going to see if the Dodgers can buy a championship, right? And there's always going to be parity baked in. But then you also add in now, very few teams are keeping these guys around for a long time, right? You have the Astros that have been the closest thing to a dynasty in recent years, but nobody else. It's turning into more of a meat market where, okay, come in, play as hard as you can, get hurt, and we'll find somebody else. So I think that changes things. And then you add in teams like the Tigers that, they're young and hungry, and they're all making a name for themselves with each other, which, that's the most powerful thing you can do in a championship run.
Again, Drew Storen, our guest. Make sure you are visiting his website, as in drinkfieldofdreams.com. New line is about to be released, and as he said earlier, available in stores in the Indianapolis area in the very near future. One of the people, there's actually a couple of different people that I'm connected to, even though I don't know them. I literally had the chance to broadcast their games when they were younger, much like you. I called your games when you were 12 years old, playing in the Midwest, Little League over at 46th and Midhofer in that regional. I saw Lucas Urseg as a high school player in California. He played in the Greater Lafayette World Series when he was a 15-year-old and a 16-year-old, when it was the old Colt World Series, I should say, back at Loeb Stadium. Also a place that exceedingly well. He made the conversion from being an infielder, a third baseman, to a reliever, and now he is a closer for a team that has a chance to play in the World Series. You mind describing just how difficult it is to do that, to switch positions to be a pitcher when you get to professional baseball?
Yeah, that's, hey, let's talk about pitchers are the most elite athletes in the world, Greg. So you're talking, it's tough. It's tough to really, turn that. No, you got, especially a guy that, it's one thing you see position guys come in and pitch all the time now, and they're like, I could do that. But to see somebody that actually can do it, I mean, you've seen it with Kenley Jansen, right? He's another great example, but he was a catcher, so to have a guy that's an infielder make the transition is awesome. I mean, that's the beauty of baseball where, hey, you figure out how to throw hard and throw strikes, you're going to do all right.
Again, Drew Storen, our guest. Greg Rakestraw for JMV. It's The Ride on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Now let's talk about Shohei Ohtani, because you can't have a baseball conversation in 2024 without talking about him, and understandably, rightfully so. Whether it's this year, previous years where he is pitching and hitting as a guy that, again, did this professionally for 8 years. What's it like to watch him do what he does on seemingly a daily basis?
I mean, you got to soak it in. It's ridiculous, especially what he did this year. Nobody in the history of the game has done the things that he's done as a hitter, and mind you, he's a pitcher. That's the thing that's so insane. He's a pitcher on a rehab assignment, and he's setting major league records, and he's making it it doesn't even look like Williamsport. It's above Williamsport. It's Danny Almonte type stuff, and like, it's just incredible to see. And like, people are tired of, it's, whatever. It's Ohtani. It's like, yes, because he lives up to all of it. And, it's something special, man. And when he comes back on the mound, I can't wait to see it.
I looked this up as you were giving the answer. His first year was your first year out as you were trying to work your way back into Major League Baseball. As a pitcher, do you want the challenge of facing a guy like that? Or are you like, thank God I have to throw it to that guy? How do you feel on that subject?
Oh, I want it. That was the thing. Those are the guys you remember, right?
Right.
Facing the A-Rods of the world, and that's because that's what people ask about, right? And you want to see how good you are. That to me, I always wanted to have that. But I remember in 17 when I first saw his mechanics, I just wanted to see him throw in person because those mechanics, man, are magical. I was like, all right, that's how you pitch.
Very well said. All right, a couple quick things, and then we'll let you go. In terms of, again, every series is tied at 1-1. You just kind of got a feeling about a team. If I said, all right, pick one of these 8, who would you roll with right now?
I like the Padres. I mean, this is again completely biased, but also look at the adversity that they already were dealing with, and that the Machado meeting mid-game, there's your parallel to Jason Hayward with the Cubs back in the day, kind of deal. Is that the thing that defines them? It can go that way, but also the Phillies, man. They whoever comes out of that Mets Phillies series, I think is going to be pretty interesting because they're going to be playing some high stakes games, and if the Dodgers Padres games kind of stay a little lopsided, then they might have a leg up on them.
All right, knowing that you finish your days with the Reds, at least in terms of big league baseball, obviously the Reds are going to win the World Series next year because Terry Francona is now their manager. At least that's what me and other Reds fans are talking about. Your thoughts on the move and Tito getting back in the game? I
love it. I mean, you're ecstatic for a good reason, right? Like, this is exactly what I think the organization needed. I know that Tito, I never played for him, but, he's an old school guy. And I think this game is all about balance. And you need guys to, hedge being yourself, but also hedge being a good teammate. And, getting that, you can't reinvent the wheel, and, it's a long season. And I think that regularity and kind of some of that old school taste is going to be really beneficial for that team.
You've got 30 teams in Major League Baseball. How many are ones that you're like, hey, the manager can really make a difference here? The old line is it's always about the Jimmies and the Joes, not the X's and the O's. How many managers in Major League Baseball do you think are truly difference makers? Because we kind of feel that way about Francona, not we as Reds fans, we as those that have been around, Major League Baseball, covered it, been a fan, et cetera. What percentage of guys do you think truly are difference makers in whether their team's a playoff team or not, whether their team's winning a playoff series or not? How would you classify that?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a 5 to 10%er, right? I mean, You have guys like Bruce Bochy. It's the guys with the mileage, the mileage and the experience to, hey, keep the young guys off the emotional roller coaster. And, that they don't get caught up in the noise. But then you also have like Stephen Vogt, right? Who, hey, a phenomenal teammate, a young manager that, hey, is he making a difference? You don't know yet, so there's a lot of guys too that it's like, oh, you just assume he's going to make it work, and so much of it is right place, right time. And, again, that you have to avoid the injury bug more than anything.
Any desire for you to get into coaching or managing or simply being a bourbon millionaire the route you're going?
I'm coaching both boys in baseball right now. And this, for me, that's plenty for now. I don't want to go back on the road. I'm kind of traveling a lot as it is with the bourbon stuff. So, unless I change my mind down the road, I just see myself coaching the boys and coaching around here.
It's not a legally binding comment. It's perfectly okay. You're allowed to go change your mind down the road at some point in time. One more time, folks, the website is drinkfieldofdreams.com. Again, new bourbon lines that are tied in to a specific player, and some of those are Hall of Fame caliber. You know the bourbon, the whiskey is going to be Hall of Fame caliber. drinkfieldofdreams.com is the website. Thanks for the time and the conversation, my friend, and please give my best to your mom and dad, okay?
Will do. Thanks, Rick. I appreciate you as always.
You got it. Drew Storen, again, kind enough to join us, and I should have had the Field of Dreams bourbon to appreciate this moment from last night. Because I touched about this, and I was going to have Drew on the show today. And so I had a chance to see Lucas Erceg play as a high school player. He is from the kind of the San Jose, California area. I think he actually played at Cal, if I remember right. And again, this would have been after Drew was already in the major leagues. But as I'm flipping back and forth between the MLB playoff game and Monday Night Football, I turn over in inning number 8, and Tommy Kahnle is on the mound for the New York Yankees. And I'm like, called his baseball games in college. I did the Division II World Series. He was the most valuable player for Lynn University in Florida that won the D2 World Series that year. He was a stud then, and he's still playing Major League Baseball 15 years later. It kind of gives you an idea. The next inning, Lucas Erceg comes in. I'm like, had a chance to call his games. I go over to Monday Night Football, and I'm like, yep, there's George Karlaftis. Called a bunch of his games in high school. There's Carson Steele. Called a bunch of his games in high school. I'm pretty sure the Wharton kid that played at Missouri S&T for the Chiefs, I think I would have seen him play against the University of Indianapolis when I was doing those games. Bit of an old man. I'm like, it's kind of cool to look up and go, yep, calling that guy, yep, uh-huh. So, again, that's the old man moment that I got to have in watching those games last night. I will probably end up watching more MLB playoff action than I did watch regular season baseball. And again, that is not me chastising in any way, shape, form, or fashion, MLB. I think MLB is actually doing some things right. I am a person that likes the pitch clock. I'm a person that likes the fact that they limited the shift. I'm a person that likes the fact that they limited attempts over at first base. They also, you're not playing the clock. I respect that. One of the things to do. And if as a purist you hate me saying those things, well, don't worry about it because I'm not the one that's watching all the time anyway. But as someone that is turned into more of a casual baseball fan, I'm cool with all of those things. Does not bother me in the slightest. Just because I like a game that has a little more movement to it. I like a game that tends to, I'm not interested in 3.5, 4 hours at this point in my life. I'm just not. And if you dislike that, I can live with that. I am okay with that. But if you want to talk a little more playoff baseball, we can certainly do so. A couple of tweets that I got in when I kind of went through the lineup of the show nearly an hour ago from two friends of mine, from Jason. Do you have to bring up that it's been since 1995? Now I am depressed. Yeah, buddy. And Jason's a friend of mine. Jason and I were at a Reds playoff game where they could have clinched like 11 years ago. And there was a home run ball hit right next to me, and John and Tony saw me in the crowd, and the Reds still lost the game. Yeah. From Greg, who's a big-time Mets fan, the last Mets championship I was 7 in 1986. Greg, the last time my team won a championship was 4 years later, and I was 13. So I'm pretty much in the same boat there with you. Maybe I'd have a little more sympathy for the Mets winning, or more of an appreciation for the Mets winning for the first time in 38 years. But as someone that does not have a team that I'm aligned with, again, the Royals have only been 9 years, but the Royals went through 30 years where they were seemingly never in the mix. And so if it's the Royals, great. I don't know anybody in the Padres organization the way that Drew does, but especially in this series, knowing that it's the little brother being San Diego, not as a team, maybe to some degree as a team, but as a community where everything is about Los Angeles. You lost your NBA team 40-something years ago to Los Angeles. You lost your NFL team to Los Angeles. And the one major league sports venture. They're getting ready to have Major League Soccer. But the one you got right now is MLB, and you're going against the Dodgers, the big, bad bully up I-5. I would love to see the Padres win that series. Tigers or Guardians, I really don't care just because they're kind of an underdog story, whichever one were to win that. It was kind of the shame of the Cubs-Indians World Series. The Cubs finally ending that curse and finally winning for the first time in more than a century. Well, the other team hadn't won in 70 years either, and now that number is up to 76. So if it's the Guardians, I'm cool with that. But as someone that, again, I might know a couple of people tangentially that are involved, but not having, with my team not being close to the mix, I'm rooting for the story. I'm rooting for the little guy. I'm doing the opposite of the national media when it comes to the baseball playoffs. You know, I'm not rooting for, a Yankees. I'm not rooting for a Subway Series. Hell no. I'm not rooting for Yankees-Dodgers. No, thank you. Give me Padres and Tigers, a rematch of the World Series from 40 years ago. Now, that I can get down with. Give me San Diego and Cleveland. I can roll with that as well. San Diego Royals, maybe to a slightly lesser extent. I'm not going to lie, man. If Milwaukee had won, I'd have been all about Milwaukee winning too. I would have all about getting Bob Uecker a World Series ring as a broadcaster for the Brewers. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. You want to talk a little MLB playoffs? We can do that. But now, after we've been very guest-heavy for the first 80 to 85 minutes of the show, now it's going to be you and me talking. And as I tell people, yes, I do have an older sister, as you learned earlier in the show, but I was really kind of raised more as an only child. I was a talk show host for 9 years. So, and being the level of nerd that I am, I have had a lifelong love affair with the sound of my own voice. Instead of, I'm not kidding about this, instead of having for a good time, call my home phone number when I was in high school, it said for a good lecture, call my home phone number. That's like one of my best friends that inscribed that into a stool at the high school as well. So seriously, I can make this a monologue. I'd much rather have a conversation. Phone lines are open now. Dial us up, topic or topics of your choice, 317-239-1070. Hit me up on Twitter, at Greg Rakestraw, and we'll chat. No big whoop. Greg Rakestraw in for JMV. It's The Ride on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
JMV.
Son, you got a panty on your head. Just drive fast, eh?
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
John's in a meat locker, or he's at the meat locker, the Odin meat locker, the famous because of this program, Odin meat locker. He's getting on the Redneck Autobahn. When the sign says Odin Elnora, the high school's on the left, you just hang a right, you'll find it. It's not far away. John will find his way back to Indianapolis or the south side, whatever, tomorrow. I'm sure he's on the road someplace on Thursday. I'm sure he's on the road someplace on Friday, but back here in the DriveHubler.com studios tomorrow. Greg Rakestraw filling in until then, and the first hour and a half of the show or so filled with outstanding conversation, not because of me, because people I had on, Pat Boylan, Drew Storen. Last segment of the show will be Zach Osterman of the Indianapolis Star, and we're going to talk a smidge of Indiana basketball. But frankly, the football conversation was so good, I don't think there's going to be time for the basketball conversation. So in October, going into a bye, the Indiana Hoosiers football team has been so good that we're going to spend like 16, 17 minutes just talking about IU football. Seriously. If you want to talk about them right now, we can do that. Hit me up on Twitter at Greg Rakestraw. You can also dial the program too, 317-239-1070 if you would like. A couple more tweets, one from earlier in the show, one from just a couple of minutes ago from Jeremiah. Not alone in the baseball stance, I watch occasionally and found it easier with the pitch count clock. Red success did get my attention off and on this year. And I think that's, part of Ohtani is that while I can sit here and say, hey, I want the smaller market team to win, I'm rooting for the Padres, and more on that in a matter of moments, but there is something to not just the big market nature of Dodgers, Yankees, Mets, Phillies, of the 8 teams that are still left, but there is something to be said for the casual fan will watch because Shohei Ohtani might do something great every time he swings a bat. That I actually understand and respect. More than this traditional of, well, it's New York versus L.A. Well, the rest of us in the middle of the country, would like to extend a certain finger in a certain direction towards both coasts about things like that. Give me the old Midwestern World Series, and I am just fine. And because there's not a Midwestern team in the National League side, we'll just have to adopt San Diego for whatever reason, for seemingly the purposes of this conversation. From Jim, our official SoCal correspondent, Jim. Did you mention the Padres have never won the World Series? In fact, no major San Diego professional team has ever won a championship. Let's go Padres. Yeah, they're the last of the Mohicans. Chargers got to the Super Bowl after the 94 season. The Chargers are the one team. The Chargers got cited during the Colts-Jaguars broadcast in terms of Sunday because the Jaguars are trying to replicate what the San Diego Chargers did in 1992, and that is be the one team to start 0-4 and still be a playoff team at the end of that season. So that one I had off the top of my head, kind of like my hair that is missing. I need to talk to JMV about maybe his source for that because the angle of that webcam is none too good as I look at it. I need to go find a hat, but I got like a size 8.5 head. So like a quilt I need to put on there or something anyway. So those are the tweets if you want to get to. Something else you want to talk about? Feel free to dial us up. 317-239-1070. Again, from a guest standpoint, I don't have like a regularly scheduled Colts guest that's going to join us. Then again, I do the preseason games on TV. I get to do the post-game show on the Redidio in my 13th year of that. I guess I could interview myself. I'd rather not. And trust me, the phone lines were pretty full. The last time I was in this chair, like exactly 48 hours ago, we did not have a problem getting phone calls on the show, even for a road game on Sunday afternoon. Now, maybe the tenor of the conversation might change a little bit. The facts of the conversation, nothing has changed. because the most common the most common statement on the program on Sunday afternoon was Gus Ballard's got to go. Gus Bradley's got to go. Chris Ballard was second of that. Freudian slip. Well, not both are still employed by the Indianapolis Colts. I didn't have a chance to listen to much of it, but Gus Bradley, there we go, did have his weekly Zoom as the defensive coordinator of the Colts. I'll be at practice tomorrow and hear what Shane Steichen has to say. Talk to, I'm sure, Joe Flacco, if not Anthony Richardson, if not both. Normally, quarterback talks on Wednesday, and we'll see if both of them are talking tomorrow, if they kind of get stretched out over different days. And I'll be at practice to kind of see exactly how many reps is Anthony Richardson going to get in the early portion of practice, or whether the Colts will kind of play that close to the vest in terms of what their quarterback attack plan is going to be for Sunday afternoon's game in Nashville. The one big change that did happen for the Colts, though, is that they waived Dallas Flowers. And that is a significant thing, not because Dallas has this great pedigree or great track record. Again, in the span of 2 1/3 seasons, he goes from undrafted free agent that played at Pittsburgh State, Division II, Grandview, NAI, formerly in the same conference as Marion University, to a guy that you thought was maybe a project at corner, was going to be a guy that maybe got some reps in terms of being a kick returner for the Colts, to last year was a starter to begin the year before he then suffered a season-ending injury about this time of the season, and then was relegated to a backup before Juju Brents got hurt, but performed so poorly on Sunday, he was released by the team on Monday. You can count on the times probably on one hand that something like that happens during the course of an NFL season. And so, I'm sure this was not the intention of the Colts, but there's also no way you can't make that jump from point A to point B. That's a scapegoat. That's saying, all right, we think if we make this move, that if we bring up a guy from the practice squad, if we play the guy in Womack that we brought in from the 49ers, if Chris Lamons gets more playing time, if maybe, hopefully, Kenny Moore can return this week, again, we'll find more about that tomorrow, that, Kenny bumps outside in a 2-cornerback system, bumps back inside, you're going to play 3, and maybe that's a sign that Kenny's injury is going to allow him to return. Maybe not. But once you make that move, whether it's at a coach level, whether it's at a GM level, whether it's at a player level, which is the case this time around, once you make that move to say you no longer have a job, well, it speeds up the process of the fingers of blame. So if the Colts defense plays better on Sunday, then maybe you simply say, well, all right, there was something to it. That those big plays that were allowed, those 2 passes specifically of 61 and 85 yards, was because there was a missed assignment. And obviously the picture went viral yesterday of Dallas diving at the feet of Brian Thomas Jr. Kind of easy to see where the finger of blame went for that play. But if the Colts don't do that on Sunday against the Titans, then you go, all right, maybe there was something to it. And again, I'm not saying that, in other words, saying, oh, my God, they just got a starting cornerback. Maybe I guess a little bit I am. But it's not like I had this very high level of expectation for Dallas Flowers. Again, he was an undrafted free agent. Circumstance put him in the position to start last year. He probably had a chance to win the job this year, either opposite Juju Brents, or maybe he could have been he and Jalen Jones with Juju coming off the bench. Maybe that wasn't going to be the case with Juju being a second-round pick. But he had the opportunity to play again, and after just 2 or 3 weeks of doing that, the team released him. Did not bench him, released him. So, all right. It wasn't the step that a lot of folks were asking, and I'm not sure that step's going to be taken or made during the course of a season. But it's something. And now let's see how it plays out on Sunday afternoon. Let's see what the phone lines look like when I'm in this chair 5 days from now. Same bat time, same bat channel, hopefully a very different bat result. And honestly, I feel differently about the Titans. And it's not because of any, anything that I would take from the game on Sunday. I realize how bad Trevor Lawrence has been this season at the end of last season. But over the course of his career, you've seen more from Lawrence than you have Will Levis, Captain Mayonnaise, or Mason Rudolph. And by the way, props to Will Levis. He is cashing in on that weird quirk, whatever that is. He is going to the bank and running with it, which is absolutely what he should do. So good on him, even as I'm going to make fun of him every time I bring him up, even though, as you can tell, for those of you watching online, clearly this is a physique that's partially, it's in part due to some mayonnaise consumption over the years. Then maybe it's just the history. Maybe we are so conditioned to the Colts going to North Florida and losing, but going to Middle Tennessee and winning, that I go, well, history tells me the Colts are going to play better in Nashville because it's what they do. And I kind of think this Colts team, I'm not sure I've ever had less of a true idea what a team is going to be after 5 games than I do this Indianapolis Colts team. But something tells me that, and again, I'm not forecasting long-term success, but I do like their chances against the Titans. Because I knew the Jaguars, despite the fact they were 0-4, are they really a winless football team from a talent standpoint? No. And while the Titans do have a win, it was against a third-string quarterback of the Miami Dolphins, one that had to rally to beat the Patriots. Or did the Patriots actually win that game? I've lost track of who won that game on Sunday. But they got the benefit of the schedule. And I think from an overall talent standpoint, the Titans are 4th best in the AFC South. How much difference is there between teams 2, 3, and 4? I don't know. But did I expect it to be 37-34 on Sunday in terms of that score? No. But I think the Colts are going to win on Sunday. I didn't have a good feeling about it. I have a better feeling about the Titans, in part because of who I think the Titans are. But I've also got a better feeling about it because of maybe some of the pieces the Colts will get back. Like, I feel good that Jonathan Taylor will be back on Sunday. And whether it's Joe Flacco or Anthony Richardson, you give me Jonathan Taylor. Again, I like the Colts' chances in this scenario. So don't take that long term. Colts going to be a playoff team. I'm not shouting that from the mountaintop. But I do think the Colts will be a better football team coming up this Sunday. You want to talk about it? Feel free. 317-239-1070. Hit me up on Twitter at Greg Rakestraw. Zach Osterman at about 5:30, 5:35 or so. Until then, it's you, me, nothing but air and opportunity. It's The Ride without JMV. Greg Rakestraw filling in, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Robo, any special message for all the kids watching at home?
Stay out of trouble. 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Welcome back. It is The Ride without JMV. Greg Rakestraw filling in here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. In case you missed Pat Boylan as well as Drew Storen. Podcast page at 1075thefan.com. We'll have Zach Osterman coming up at the tail end of the program as we talk a little IU football. Phone lines are open between now and then. We got time for at least 2 calls this segment, if not more. Let's get to Greg on line 1. Greg, thanks for dialing us up. How can I help you, sir? Hello, Greg. Goodbye, Greg. Let's go to BTR on line 2. Are you there, my friend?
Greg Rakestraw, my friend.
How are you, bud?
The master of high school football and the sport that I don't like.
I'm okay with that. What you got for me, buddy?
I got in late with JMV. I wanted to ask his opinion. I know you're a Reds fan. What do you think of Terry Francona hire?
Well, I think clearly we're going 163-0 in 162 games next year, buddy. No, I mean, and again, do I think David Bell was completely at fault? No. Do I think they could have gotten more in terms of free agents to help? Yes, given the amount of tickets they sold the year before. But I also believe in at some point in time, you got to have a new voice. And for a young team, a guy that has been there and done that, and those guys can look and see the World Series rings and know the playoff experience, I thought it was a heck of a hire. And, you know, we can look back at Dusty Baker and say whether he was a success or a failure, because they made the playoffs but didn't win, but at least he got them there. And that's the next step back for Reds fans. So, frankly, I love it. What about you?
I'm really excited about it, really. He's had a lot of success, and he set a year out to just kind of decompress, refresh, whatever. He's going to have a fresh perspective, and I don't know. I'm excited about it, and I'm with you. And rest in peace, Pete Rose.
All right, thanks for the phone call, buddy. I appreciate you. Let's get to Jim's telephone call next. Topic or topics of your choice. It's Substitute Teacher. Get open phone lines, 317-239-1070. Hello, Jim.
Hello, Greg, brother. I've been listening to you for a long time. As a man who's had a lot of hours behind on the microphone, when I'm listening to Fisher and Buck call the IU games and then listen to those folks from West Lafayette call those games, my golly, it's like night and day. I mean, you can hear Fish and Buck just having a great time watching the Hoosiers play, and the other guys watching the Boilers. It's like, you know, what can they do?
It's amazing the difference that winning makes, Jim.
Well, and then the other thing, if you could give me like in 2 minutes or less, what the heck is going on with Indy soccer? What's going on with all that?
That's a good question. And frankly, Jim, I don't know much. I think there are some conversations that are happening behind the scenes in terms of trying to have a bit of a unified effort. But that stuff, I don't want to say is above my pay grade because I think I have the mental capacity to handle it, but it's not been included with me. So I'll just leave it at that.
Gotcha. Keep doing the good work, guy.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. Speaking of the Indy 11, they are in action tonight. A very rare Tuesday night match and an important one to boot. They are playing at Loudoun United. Loudoun as in Loudoun, Virginia, as in Northern Virginia, as in a BMV suburb. So that's on ESPN+. Next 2 matches this week are on the road for the Indy 11. At Loudoun, at Detroit. Loudoun is in a playoff position, as are the Indy 11. Indy is currently in 6th. Top 8 make it. They have 4 matches left to go. Just 1 match at home remains for the Indy 11, and that is next Saturday against Birmingham Legion, who currently are 7th in terms of the Eastern Conference playoff chase. And hopefully I get to call a little playoff soccer. The team made it last year, but it was conflicting with the Colts game. And I ended up picking the Colts game. Hopefully we can find separate times for my passion for calling football and football. So hopefully those two things can separate a little bit, and I get to call both of them or be a part of both of them in some way, form, or fashion on the weekend of November the 2nd and the weekend of November the 3rd. 317-239-1070 is the telephone number. Hit me up on Twitter at Greg Rakestraw. Hit in the YouTube chat. I will check that out during the course of the break as well. We can talk Colts with you. Perfectly happy to do that. We had somebody that had called in and said, hey, can you talk IU football now because I'm in the car right now? So if that person is still in the car, maybe we'll talk IU football for you when we come back as well. Your phone calls after this, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
The Ride with JMV.
Have you ever killed anyone?
Yeah, but they were all bad.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Thanks for joining us on this Tuesday afternoon. And back in the old days, when I was a radio program director, like the average interaction, average time spent listening, like at a given time, was often like 11 minutes. I'm not sure if that has changed with the way that we consume media, the fact that you're listening as much off of your phone or watching the YouTube stream that's also on Twitter and Facebook as we speak. Maybe that has led you, because of the portability and accessibility of it, to listening more. But if you wonder why people like reset things or sometimes re-rack a guest, well, sometimes they got to leave and go someplace. But other times it's because they're like, hey, it's a different audience at 5 o'clock than it is in 3 o'clock. Now, while James and I have been listening to the entire show, maybe you haven't. So here is your 5 o'clock reset as you're getting into your car, hopefully heading home on what is yet another gorgeous Tuesday afternoon and into the evening. First of all, John's not here. He had to go get copious amounts of meat. So he took the day off. He drove down the Redneck Autobahn to northern Davies County to go to the famous Odin Meat Locker. I would like for somebody in this building to do a study as to the amount of free publicity the Odin Meat Locker has gotten over the years. I mean, I'm sure it's in the tens of thousands of dollars. How many head of cattle have been served to listeners of this radio station because John drops an Odin Meat Locker? And if you think that's like some sort of slang or cover-up for doing something else, no, he posted pictures. It's on his social media feed. He was at the Odin Meat Locker earlier today. That's not like some hip, cool way of saying he was doing something else. No, he's literally at a meat locker. Maybe on his way home now. So he's all stocked up on meat, I think, for the winter. He is back tomorrow. So you're stuck with me, Greg Rakestraw. Hello, how are you? Hope you're doing well. Phone lines are open for you now, 317-239-1070, at Greg Rakestraw on Twitter, or in the YouTube chat room. We'll say hello that way as well. From a guest standpoint, here is what you've missed. Pat Boylan was on the show. We did talk some Fever, because we can do that now 12 months a year around here. And we talked some Pacers, because, you know, the Pacers open the preseason tonight. And preseason NBA games don't tend to have the luster of preseason NFL games. And it has nothing to do with the fact that I tend to make money at the preseason NFL games. It just kind of is what it is. It's 4 games. They play them. It's great that we have radio for them. It gives us more of a reason to talk about the Indiana Pacers. If you want to talk about the Pacers, now's the time. 317-239-1070, at Greg Rakestraw on Twitter. You can even email the show too, Greg at 1070thefan.com. I like this basketball team. I thought the moves that were made during the offseason were the right ones. You've got a young core together. Keep them that way. Bank on their ability to continue to improve together. Yes, I know the Pacers got a little bit of a benefit from playing the Bucks while they were injured and playing the Knicks while they were injured. Yes, I acknowledge the fact the Knicks have gone out and made some significant moves, and that even continued up until, just a couple of weeks ago in terms of flipping their roster. Yes, I know the Sixers made moves as well, but the biggest move the offseason the Pacers made was made at the trading deadline last year, was bringing in Pascal Siakam, and you keep him. And you extend Andrew Nembhard, and you extend Obi Toppin, and you keep TJ McConnell around. And I understand to a certain degree, you're like, excuse me, good sir, the Colts just tried this strategy, and so far, not working well. Hashtag team run it back. I understand that. I think this is just a little bit different. I like the chemistry of the group. I think this is still a motivated group. And again, because of their age and being so young, I think this is a good way to go. But it is a very different position in the span of just a couple of years as to how things have changed for this franchise. I remember actually attending a game, and I want to say this was probably end of March, I would say, of 2023. And, Pacers had decided that they were going to fight for that last playoff spot. Team Run It Bank was team, hey, let's make sure we get a decent draft pick. Let's not push for that last playoff spot. We're not on our timeline just yet. Well, the timeline has been fast-forwarded significantly. But going into a season where I go, hey, listen, I think I kind of know what the 9-man rotation looks like. And I like the 9-man rotation. And we had Pat Boylan on, and he said, listen, Rick Carlisle talked about the fact that there's 11 guys that are going to vie for playing time. I think 9 of them are going to play. Well, the starting lineup is Tyrese Halliburton, Andrew Nembhard, Aaron Nesmith, Pascal Siakam, Miles Turner. Coming off the bench, T.J. McConnell, Benedict Mathurin, Obi Toppin, and then you'd think it's Isaiah Jackson as the backup to Turner. Maybe you give Wiseman some early minutes. You see what he has for you in camp. You don't like what you see. I think he's on a non-guaranteed deal. I think you can kind of move on from him, or he becomes a project, try to work him in at some point in time. And then Jarris Walker, where do you work him in? I realize how high of a level of a draft pick he was. And I get that it is a different mindset very quickly in terms of, hey, this guy's the 6th pick in the draft. We got to get him more run. Benedict Mathurin. This guy's the 8th pick in the draft or 9th pick in the draft, whatever he was. And we're like, a year later, I'm not sure there's room to play him. But it's kind of where this team is. Expectations change. And so it's going to be tough to go, 25 wins, 35 wins, 47 wins. I think that's the math that has taken place over the course of the last couple of years. If you kept that train going, well, we're talking 60 wins. I'm not saying that. And yes, it's going to be hard to match Eastern Conference Finals, going back to Eastern Conference Finals. I get that, just because it's some rarefied air. But I'm bullish on the Indiana Pacers. And I thought the strategy that Kevin Pritchard, Chad Buchanan, Rick Carlisle did in the offseason was the right one for this team. So tonight's the first night of the preseason. Not sure how fired up that gets you. Obviously, we'll do this again in a couple of weeks when the season really starts, and that's when we will more largely kind of sink our teeth into this. But if you want to talk Pacers, we can certainly do that at 317-239-1070. Or if you want to talk about something else, prefer you make it sports-related because it is kind of a sports talk show, but we have a wide palette here on the program. Elijah is up first. Hello, Elijah. How are you?
What's going on, Greg? How you doing?
Good, buddy. What's up?
Yeah, I just want to comment on some things you just said about the Pacers, and honestly, really kind of focused on Mathurin. The comment that there may not be room for Mathurin in the rotation.
Not Mathurin. Walker. Mathurin's your 6th man.
Okay. I mean, I don't. But first off, Mathurin should be a starter. I don't understand why he wouldn't be. Before he got hurt last year, when the offense was stagnant and guys weren't taking shots, which, by the way, I don't know if anyone here watched the playoffs. How many games did it seem like guys didn't want to shoot?
Right.
Guys wanted to pass the ball. Guys wanted to drive to the basket and kick it out, but nobody wanted to shoot the damn thing.
And Elijah, knowing that you've got mouths to feed in terms of Tyrese Halliburton, Nembhard that create his own shot, Siakam that needs the ball, that Turner is your outlet in terms of shooting the ball, I kind of want Mathurin to be the 6th man for the reason of, Benedict, when you're on the floor, go get him. Now, just because he doesn't start doesn't mean that he's not going to finish either. If he's having a hot hand night and you want him on at the floor at the end of the game, I'm all for it. But to me, I think Benedict Mathurin has the perfect mindset, persona, and personality to be a great 6th man in this league.
I mean, if you're talking like a James Harden situation, when he's the better player, but he works better with the second team, then I can see that. But even if he's going to be the 6th man or he's going to be the first guy at the bench, he should still be getting, 40 minutes? He should be in 36 minutes a game. He really should. He's a volume shooter, but he's efficient. He was one of our more efficient players, and when he was scoring well, the offense was at its best before he got injured. Those games against the Bucks, those games against the Knicks, game 2 against the Knicks for a perfect example where nobody seemed like they wanted to shoot the ball and everyone looked timid. Mather's not going to have that problem.
No.
The dude's a killer. He has the Kobe mindset, and he has the skill set to bring that all together.
Trust me, if he's playing like that to begin the year, and Elijah, thanks for the phone call, that lineup's not set in stone. But how I envision this lineup put together, I like Mather as a sixth man. AJ is up next at 317-239-1070. Hello, AJ.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, sir. What you have for us?
I got 2 questions about Anthony Richardson.
Yes, sir.
First off, do you think there's any murmurings amongst other players or personnel about his lack of ability to play? Because they're not going to say it to his face, but
sure.
How can you follow somebody into a war when they're only there half the time or even less than
Let me before I get to your second point, I'll jump in and answer that. And again, I'm not going to try to pretend like I'm in the locker room all the time, but I'm in the locker room enough. Everybody else in that team likes him. Like in other words, I think they believe in him as a person and as a player because there's been no murmuring from other guys in the locker room about a lack of character or not being tough enough or not wanting to, it's not from a lack of effort on his part. So he is well liked in that locker room. I can tell you, AJ, I can tell you that much.
Well, Bob Sanders was too. But,
sure, that's fair. That's fair. I get it. Yeah. Yep. We're AJ, we're not to that point yet, but obviously it's on your radar. I mean, the stats don't lie. That he's dealt with 4 injuries over the course of 9 or 10 games of his professional career, not counting the last 12 from last year. So, no, it's fair to bring up, but we're not there yet. What else do you have for me, sir?
Okay, well, Joe Flacco's not always going to fall in our lap every year.
That's right.
What price are we going to? What price are we're going to have a quality backup? I mean, the history has proven that. So, how much, do you think are we willing to pay to keep somebody out there that's competent to pick up the pieces when he goes down again for another injury? I mean, you can't have a scrub out there because then the season's pretty much gone.
AJ, thanks for the phone call, buddy. That's what they've done. In Gardner Minshew, they got one of the best backup quarterbacks in the league, who's now starting for the Raiders. They went out and got the comeback player of the year, who was phenomenal in playing for the Colts on Sunday. And when you have a quarterback on a rookie deal, you have that luxury. And again, if we're having this conversation a year from now, it's probably a different conversation. It's 5 games into the season. And again, like I said earlier, do I have a beat on this Colts team? Absolutely not. No. And it's the most confused or lack of knowledge I have on a Colts team after 5 games that I think in any season I've been a part of. But on Richardson, you're concerned, but you're not making a decision yet. If this trend continues the rest of this season, if we get into early next season and it's kind of something similar, then we're having a different conversation. Brant, you stay right there. I owe you a commercial break. When we come back, race of the day and more of your telephone calls. Zach Osterman at 5:35. It's the Ride Without JMV, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
The Ride with JMV.
Remember, mum is the word.
Certainly, but
Mum.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
I always appreciate a quality Galaxy Quest reference. Well done by you. Well done by Heath Birch. He is our Harrah's Hoosier Park Race of the Day winner on Park Lane Official. You would have won $18.40 on a $2 bet. $2 exacta was worth $47.20, and a 50-cent trifecta got you $121.60. Congratulations, Heath, and thanks for tuning in to 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Brant has been on hold through that entire break, but Brant's a friend of mine, so I can make him wait. Hello, Brant. How are you?
Mr. Rakestraw, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing just fine, thank you. How can I be of service to you today, sir?
So I was going to talk to you about the Colts, but you've talked about them quite a bit already. Wanted to talk about a little college football playoff probability between
Notre Dame is not getting in, just so you know. Now, if it's another caller, I would tell them that Notre Dame is getting in. But since you are how can I say this kindly? I won't, because it'll be misconstrued. Just to gig you as an Irish fan, they're not getting in, Brant.
You know what, Greg? I appreciate that, but I was asking, can we have a double? Can we have the Hoosiers and the Irish getting in to the college football playoff this year?
Absolutely, they can. No, I mean seriously. I mean, the schedule in terms of strength has not done the Irish any favors. I still have a hard time thinking if they run the table, which is possible, at 11-1 and with 12 teams. I think they're going to get in. I just do. And for Indiana to get in, I think they have to go 11-1, meaning, again, because of their conference schedule, they play great opponents. If they were to somehow beat Ohio State, which I realize is crazy talk, since that happens, once or twice in a generation, especially in that building. I mean, literally when Indiana won there in 87, that is what is referred to as the darkest day in the history of Ohio State University football.
Well deserved.
So, if Indiana ran the table other than that game, they would have a chance. If Indiana would go 11-1 and somehow their one wasn't Ohio State, meaning they beat them, they would have a chance. So is there a chance? Yes. A great chance? No. But the fact that we can legitimately have that conversation in the middle of October and it's assumed that one of us isn't on some sort of illegal substance is crazy to me.
I agree. 1,000%, Rake. I appreciate you taking my call, my friend. Hey, shout out to Southern Indiana FC for what they've accomplished so far this season. And a 70th birthday shout-out to my father-in-law, Barry Fodry.
Good man. I'll talk to you soon, Brant.
Thank you, Rick.
That was my buddy Brant McCoskey. Brant does some soccer broadcasting for us on the ISC Sports Network, and he referenced Southern Indiana FC. Their head coach, Andrew Minnis, will be a guest of ours on Soccer Saturday, coming up this Saturday morning at 9 on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Still time for a telephone call or two, 239-1070. You want to jump on board, hit me up on Twitter at Greg Rakestraw. One thing that I wanted to get to that I haven't had a chance to get to yet, and by the way, Zach Osterman will be on about 10 or so minutes from now. This news broke yesterday. It's been rumored for some time, but I think this is awesome. And that is the IndyCar event that will take place in Arlington, using a circuit that will be around the Cowboy Stadium, so AT&T Stadium. Was it Globe Life Park, wherever the Rangers play, wherever that ballpark is there, the stadium complex in Arlington. And I'm sure there are some of you that are saying, should go back to the Texas Motor Speedway. Yeah, I get that. I like oval racing too. But what the IndyCar series has to be in the event business of is just that, is being in the event business. And I would love to see them expand and have more races, but you also have to acknowledge you have a very tight window to do so, okay? And now that the season that doesn't go into September that deeply, now it'll be even shorter, okay? That's the trade-off. You get network television for every event, but you have to be done on Labor Day weekend. The season is going to end on August 31st. So what do you do potentially? Well, that means you got to get going like as soon as the Super Bowl is over. Kind of like the Daytona 500, you need to have a race in February. What have you had recently? Well, this past year, you put an exhibition race to not have this huge gap from your season-ending race in St. Petersburg. And fingers crossed that you have a race to the streets of St. Petersburg, because that hurricane is no joke that is bearing down on the Gulf Coast of Florida and is threatened to be the first direct impact hurricane to hit Tampa Bay since 1921. Again, there are far bigger priorities than an automobile race in March. But let's hope that everything and everybody down there gets through this as best they can. But back to the point of this. This is going to be a March event, so it helps you fill that gap. Secondarily, the Cowboys have games from August through January. The Rangers have games from April, they hope, well into October. So you've got two entities coming together. They go, what's the crossover of the time where we don't have much going on here? Jerry's World's going to get a Super Bowl on a regular basis. Maybe Jerry's World gets a Final Four on a regular basis. But March, and not much going on. So if we wanted to block out all of our parking lots and build a temporary street circuit, you could do that. Couple of things. They're actually going to have suites. I saw like the diagram, the breakdown of what the racetrack is going to look like. They're actually going to have suites where the cars are going to drive under it, which I think is really super cool. It looks like they're going to have like a straightaway that's like 9/10 of a mile, which will lead to some significant speed, which is great to see. And the other thing that I think you need to kind of mention in this too, obviously, this is from a Dallas standpoint. This is Jerry Jones going, hey, look at what the Dolphins have done in terms of getting a Formula One race. Can we do that here? Well, no, sir. There's an event in Vegas. There's literally an event down the road in Austin, Circuit of the Americas, and the Miami race doesn't appear to be going anywhere. We went from a period of time where the U.S. didn't have a Grand Prix for years to now you have 3 of them. Like they get more than any other country in the world. Okay, so F1's not available to the folks in Arlington. What's the next best option? Oh, we got IndyCar. American Series, great. It's going to be on Fox. Hey, the Cowboys are on Fox. Hey, the Rangers are on Fox. It is a match made in heaven. So, again, do I want to see more oval track racing? Of course I do. But do I think we're going to see a lot of oval track racing on super speedways, meaning those 1.5-mile tracks that we used to? I just don't think that's the way the series is going. Smaller ovals, Milwaukee, absolutely. Iowa, absolutely. I didn't think the show that's put on in Nashville was a bad show at all. But I guarantee you, especially now with Dallas, as soon as the Titan Stadium gets done, we'll try to move that back to downtown Broadway and try to find the goalpost in the river. Yay, Vanderbilt. We'll wrap it up next with some Indiana football conversation. It's The Ride on the Fan.
in statistical production, whether it's stuff we could draw on a whiteboard, whether it's stuff that maybe is a little bit more intangible. All the things Curt Cignetti talked about and people around Curt Cignetti who knew Curt Cignetti talked about are stuff we have seen from Indiana through these first 6 games. Now, the bigger tests come soon,
sure.
Both because I think Indiana's going to be playing some better teams, and also because, frankly, the more you win in college football, it's like the old Greg LeMond quote, it doesn't get easier, you just go faster. So the more you win, the more people expect, the more they raise the bar for you. But so far, this has all kind of been as advertised and all in one direction, which is Curt Cignetti being able to put kind of his stamp and his imprint on this program.
By the way, if there was a guest of this show that would drop a Greg LeMond quote and think nothing of it, Zach Osterman would be that guy who joins us now on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. And normally when I ask a question about a longevity of the coach and we're 6 games in, that means things are going historically bad, not historically good. But I think people are right to even bring up, is Curt Cignetti doing such a great job in Bloomington, he could run the danger of being one and done. Has he talked about that, addressed that in any way, shape, form, or fashion?
No, and I suspect he wouldn't, even if we asked him. He plays everything pretty straight. I think, listen, Indiana fans are right to be excited about what they're seeing on the field. I totally understand anybody who is nervous about, what happens if this program, if this job opens up or this job opens up and what if he got this call or that call? What I've generally told, fans who've brought that up to me is, hey, listen, what you're seeing on the field right now just doesn't happen very often, so just enjoy it. What I think is probably fair to say, if we're taking the 10,000-foot view, we're zooming out, so to speak, if and obviously there's a few ifs here. Number one of these jobs a job that would actually appeal to Curt Cignetti has to come open. Number two, that job has to prioritize Cignetti over any other candidate. But then I think that the third question is basically, how has the calculus changed in a situation like this with the money the Big Ten schools can access, and not just for a coach's salary, but also his staffing pool, any sort of infrastructural concerns that he might want addressed, locker room renovation. I don't think anyone would want that. They just did, but using that as an example,
sure.
Maybe upgrades to a practice facility, whatever. How does that basically strengthen what Scott Dolson can do to potentially kind of keep, a head coach who obviously Dolson expressed a lot of confidence in from day one, and a lot of that confidence has been returned so far. How much does Scott Dolson have that maybe he wouldn't have 10, 15 years ago to keep that coach around longer? And then the other piece of it, too, is, especially if we're talking about Indiana compared to a job that's not in the Big Ten or the SEC, what's the calculus or sort of the cost benefit from a coach's perspective of maybe the program's got a little more money, but if I'm not in one of the 2 big conferences out there,
right,
am I doing something that I can't compensate for later on? So this is all incredibly hypothetical at the moment. At some point, if Indiana keeps winning like this, just by the nature of college football, it probably won't be anymore. But I think for starters, frankly, or for the moment, what I would tell IU fans is just enjoy this.
Right.
You've literally not gotten this since 1967, which means many of you haven't ever experienced it. Worry about that when the time comes.
All right, so the wins have not been coming, as we have well established over those 57 years in this conversation. But quality quarterback play has been here a bit more than that. So what Curtis Rourke is doing, his completion percentage is just shy of 75%. His touchdown to interception ratio is 7-1. How does Curtis Rourke compare to some of the other really good quarterbacks you have seen come through here in your time on the beat as a student, et cetera?
He is, and I'm pulling up his specific numbers while we talk. I mean, he is probably, it's fair to say, having so far as good of an individual season as just about anybody I can remember. If his season ended today, and obviously we have to acknowledge that, Indiana's non-conference schedule, that again,
sure,
they're probably going to play tougher opponents going forward. But if the season ended today and you doubled his numbers from this point, I know just off the top of my head, he would set a program record for passing yards in a season. that would be about, I think, 3,500 passing yards. And that would be a program record comfortably. His completion percentage, which is currently 73.8%, that would be a program record. 28 touchdowns. He's got 14 touchdowns and 2 picks so far. 28 touchdowns would be in or around the record. I forget. I think 28 might be the record. I think it was Kellen Lewis that did that in 07. The point is, you're talking about, the air that Curtis Rourke is kind of breathing here. Very few other quarterbacks, even if you just want to limit it to the modern era, when quarterbacks threw the ball as much as they do now, and you kind of start with like the Antoine Randall L's, or I guess maybe if you want to go back to the Trent Greens, although obviously Bill Mallory's offense was very much, kind of run to pass. But even if you limit it just to talking about maybe in this sort of spread era, he's having as good of a season so far as any Indiana quarterback really has ever had. And if you dig deeper into the numbers, I didn't ask about this specifically, but I did something for a piece that's going to come out this week about Indiana's effectiveness in the red zone. They're probably the best red zone team in the country through 6 games. And if you look at Rourke's numbers in the red zone, that is actually where his highest quarterback rating is. And that's partly, sort of by design, in the sense that quarterback rating is always going to be boosted by touchdown passes. But 10 of his 14 touchdown passes have come inside the red zone, where quarterbacks tend to struggle to throw the ball quite as effectively. He's still completing more than 65% of his passes inside the opponent's 20-yard line. He's spread, I want to say he's targeted like 8 different receivers. I think he's thrown touchdowns to 5 or 6 different receivers. So the point is, it isn't just, I made this point to somebody over the weekend. I said, I've seen Indiana offenses that were more explosive, that maybe in moments could just do something more impressive or unexpected in terms of, deep shots down the field, or obviously, the Tevin Coleman long runs where he just outrun everybody, those kinds of things. But an offense that's efficient, I don't think I've ever seen at Indiana. An offense that is so good in the red zone, so good on third downs, so good at staying ahead of the chains and making the right decisions and spreading the ball around how it needs to and being as balanced as it is. And a lot of that starts with Curtis Rourke. And that's the piece of it that, maybe you can't measure quite as easily with stats and numbers, but his feel, his leadership, his just sort of, steadiness in that position, all of it contributes to, I think I'm comfortable saying this is about as good of a season, at least a half season, let's say, as I've ever seen from an Indiana quarterback.
Zach Osterman, Indianapolis Star, all things Indiana sports. Our guest, Greg Rakestraw, in for JMV. It's The Ride on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. And we throw out a hypothetical, in the last question. I'll throw one here. Again, normally by the time November rolls around, most of your readers, subscribers, eyeballs are thinking about the start of basketball play. There's obviously going to be huge news in a couple of weeks from a recruiting standpoint when it comes to Braylon Mullins. Let's say this team gets to 8-0, which is certainly possible. Won't be easy, but certainly possible. And so that would coincide with the next big football game is the same weekend as he started the basketball season. What's getting more traffic for you on the Indy Star? Is it the start of the IU hoop season or this remarkable story that football is turning into?
My suspicion would be probably football. And of course, some of that's going to be, I'm looking at the schedule while we're talking, and, that Friday night exhibition game against Marion is right before, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Michigan State game. And then if you want to zoom ahead to the next weekend, it's, Indiana, Eastern Illinois on Sunday, but that's the day before is IU Michigan, which I think some people are looking at and wondering, could that be a college game day type situation as long as Michigan doesn't lose again and Indiana's, still firmly kind of in the conference title race at least. And I know people are talking about the playoff and all that stuff. And it does kind of become one of those sort of like, hey, one step at a time, just let it unfold. Don't skip anything. But it's interesting in the sense that if we play that tape through to the end and Indiana does come out of October 8-0, then in all likelihood, their 2 best wins will be their last 2 of the month, which is Nebraska and Washington at home. I think an 8-0 Indiana team starts getting a lot more attention in a playoff conversation because it started to add, even if it's at home, a little bit more quality to its resume with wins over Nebraska and Washington than what people would see through a lot of this first block of 6 games. and then suddenly you're at the business end where it's a rivalry game on the road against Michigan State. Then it's a potentially, prime time, whenever it kicks off. I'm saying that in the loosest sort of adjective sense, but a potential prime time game against Michigan. Then you got a bye week to get ready for, imagine if Indiana's 9-0 or 9-1 or even 10-0 going to Ohio State. That's a huge game. And then obviously it's the bucket game. And at that point too, Indiana is firmly in the thick of where are they in the playoff rankings? How can they improve their position? If they don't go to the playoff, what kind of bowl could they hope to get to? Could it be a Citrus Bowl? Could it be it's called the ReliaQuest Bowl, but let's just call it the Outback Bowl because that's what it is.
Sure.
Could it be a trip back down to Tampa? I think it's probably still going to be comfortably football season, down here through at least kind of mid-November. Obviously, you get to Thanksgiving, and that's when basketball will be playing at the Battle for Atlantis in the Bahamas. But then that feeds, very comfortably into the bucket game because that's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday in Atlantis, and then bucket game in Bloomington on Saturday. It's going to be an interesting fall. There's no doubt about that.
All right, big picture, and finally, before we let you go, this is going to mean what for Indiana University athletics? If this is anything more, let's say even just double-digit wins. This team goes 10-2 in their first Curt Cignetti season, knowing that football has always been such a struggle or a slog for most of the history of the athletic program. To seemingly have the football question answered, if even for a year, what does that mean to everyone else in Bloomington?
I mean, it is kind of hard to understate the importance of it. Number one, obviously, from a program perspective, a double-digit win season, however Indiana got to it, would be the first in program history. Indiana's never won more than 9 games in a season. So 10 wins, no matter how Indiana gets there, would be history. From a football perspective, from obviously a financial perspective, there is no such thing as a football program too successful. That's in terms of the raw stuff we can measure, like ticket sales and concessions and game day revenues and all that. That's also in terms of the soft power that a good football program gives you. As we get deeper and deeper into the playoff era, and conferences keep kind of shifting around and consolidating, and that football is the currency here, and that's not going to change anytime soon. And I don't think Indiana, certainly just with one season, suddenly vaults past Oregon or Penn State or whoever. But it certainly gives Indiana a lot more agency at a time when it pays to be good at football. My good friend and counterpart down in Louisville, Rick Bozer, said it best a few months ago. He said there are no more basketball schools anymore. Everybody's a football school. You have to figure out a way to make it work because it boosts your bottom line. It gives you more agency in this sort of modern college athletics landscape. And the last thing I would say, too, and I've seen this with non-revenue sports in particular in Indiana, I think about the big one is baseball in 2013. And a lot of Indiana programs, after watching that 2013-14 run that IU baseball had, kind of looking around and saying, why can't we do that? Like there shouldn't be anything stopping us from being that good, whether it's women's soccer, whether it's volleyball or women's basketball. I think football tried to follow some of that pattern as well. If you suddenly get your football program, which has struggled for so long, onto more level footing, and then you can keep Curt Cignetti around, and then maybe you start sort of painting a picture of a future where Curt Cignetti is if Indiana gets everything that it hopes for, Curt Cignetti is a little bit like Indiana's Barry Alvarez or Indiana's Hayden Fry, someone like that, then you're talking about kind of all boats rising in every possible way, competitive, cultural, financial, whatever it might be. And obviously that's got to start somewhere. And I suspect Scott Dolson and company would be thrilled if it started with a record-breaking season here in year one.
It starts at 6-0. Zach Osterman has been there for a lot of it. As always, thanks for the time and the insight, my friend. I think this is our first conversation about this actual type of football. Normally it's the soccer conversation that you and I tend to have.
It is. We do love chatting about European football. And I'll do that anytime. So
thanks, buddy. Have a great rest of your day.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, as always.
That'll do it for this edition of the program. Don't worry, John is back tomorrow. I don't think anything tragic happened at the Odin Meat Locker. He'll be back. Thank you, Zach Osterman. Thank you to Drew Storen. Thank you, Pat Boylan. Thanks for tuning in and putting up with me. Pacers preseason opener is not too far away. Thanks for joining us on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.